Well, I was really wanted to talk to you obviously about podcasting and, communication, but obviously you also had experience working in mainstream media, BBC and NPR. I know you've covered US elections. So one of the things we've heard recently is that this was the podcast election. What do you make of that out of interest?
I think that a key figure in the whole election drama was Barron Trump, who my son actually knows from Washington, D.C. They played FIFA together online with a group of
Wow.
friends. And so I don't think he actually met Barron, but he knew him through that grouping. And I think it was Barron who said to Donald Trump, there's this whole bunch of people out here and no one's talking to them.
Yeah.
And these are the shows that you need to get on. And these are the things you need to say. And this is the audience you'll speak to. And it's an audience that have not traditionally voted for you, but might.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, I think it's true. I think podcasting did play an outsized role in this election. And I'm kind of coming from the sort of factual end of podcasting. It's a shame for me to feel like it was the kind of political, philosophical headbanging end of podcasting that really swung it, I mean, I used to commute from New York to Washington for a couple of years, and I used to listen to some of the right-wing radio talk shows. This is back in the 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of that, it's kind of guys of our age, well, my age anyway, pontificating about this and that for hours on end,
Right.
which is not my kind of podcasting, but, seems to work for politicians. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Was it Rush Limbaugh was the name, I think, but back in the day, it's sort of some of it's an extension of that.
Yeah, and Hannity and Coombs. I'm not sure
Hannity, yeah.
Coombs, but anyway.
Yeah. When you covered the US elections in your experience, was it as ruthless as it looked forward facing behind the scenes? Is there a bit more camaraderie, or is it as bad as it seems?
No, it was. I don't think it was as ruthless. I covered Clinton's re-election, and I mean, there is always a certain camaraderie among the media, and your access to the politicians is always strictly controlled and limited. I did get an elbow in the face from one of Bob Dole's security men at one point because I got too close to Bob Dole. Yeah, but
Wow.
but we also, me and the camera guy I was working with at the time, Eric Thyra, we captured one of the most famous clips from the Bob Dole Bill Clinton election, which was when somebody said, "Do you think Bob Dole's too old, Mr. President, to be president?" And Clinton said, "It's the age of his ideas that's the problem." And so
Wow.
we sold that all over the place. We were there for that somewhere in New Mexico, I think. So it was fun following them around. Followed them around in a bus for months on end, and you feel like you're a tiny little part of a huge kind of huge mechanism. But
A much bigger thing.
it was a lot of fun. But was it politer? Was it more decent? I think so, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just, the dialogue has just got more and more coarse over the last 5 or 6 years, sort of coincided, I think, with the rise of social media and, and because Trump himself isn't sort of the politest, most socially aware human being on earth,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We are. I mean, everyone knows it now. We're living in a strange time, but we don't know how to get out of it. And I think that the social media, it seems to bring out the worst in us. I always think I have this phrase I always use. We have these hunter-gatherer brains that evolved on the plains of Africa tens of thousands of years ago that haven't changed all that much. We're incredibly flexible. And I think we're reaching our upper limits of how much communication we can have. And it just seems to make everyone a lot more angry. And politics is the kind of cesspool for it, really.
I think you're right. I think a lot of people have peaked with social media. A lot of people of my generation, I'm Gen X, a lot of my friends kind of like got excited about it because it's a way to keep in touch. We got groups, old school pals I've reunited with, old pals from college, blah, blah. There's all of that. But I think the enthusiasm for it has kind of peaked because of the amount of garbage that's there. I mean, for instance, I would never now. A couple of years ago, I probably would have checked Twitter just for the news or whatever. I would not think to go there for anything now unless unless a friend was trying to get in touch with me. So,
Yeah,
so I think people have figured out, a lot of people have figured out um, the extent to which it's helpful.
it's useful.
And people are also becoming aware of how damaging it can be to kids and people in minority situations and
Yeah,
people who are sick of that kind of thing.
yeah. I know Jonathan Haidt, I'm a big fan of. He has a new book out, The Anxious Generation, and I've not read it, but I need to get it. And I think he's talking all about, how phones have really impacted, this younger generation times. And I actually stopped. I got hooked on X about a year or so ago, and I was very late to the uptake. I didn't really have Twitter for a long time, and my God, it gets you. It's very sticky, it kind of recently I just kind of went full, I had to just completely get off it. And when I for 5 seconds, for 5 minutes, I'll notice if I'm just start scrolling again, it takes about 2 minutes for something to make my blood boil or to something to irritate me. I'm like, I've got to put this down. It's just not a good aspect of my
No, it's
life.
it's a polarizing influence. So, one of the things I've noticed, I've been teaching now 20 years, always part-time, always alongside whatever else I was doing. One of the things I've noticed is that the students, and maybe, COVID was a part of the reason for this, but the students don't look at each other in the eye,
Mm.
unless you tell them to. They,
Wow.
it's all like all of the answers to mankind are buried in that box that's in front of you, that
Yeah.
computer that's there. That's where all the answers are. That's where they all stare when they come into
Mm.
the classroom. And I say to them, we're gonna look at each other in the eye when we talk to each other. We're gonna nod. We're gonna empathize with each other. We're gonna
Mm.
let the other person know that we're listening. These are important skills.
Right. Yeah.
But it's difficult. It's difficult. All the world's answers are in that little box there, and so that's where I'm going to stare in my little safe haven. And if I want to write something nasty about somebody, they'll never know my true identity. I can just write it here and feel better about it, right?
Yeah. God,
So
strange times. That must be strange as
yeah.
a communication teacher to have to go right back to basics almost.
Oh, hey, soft skills are in vogue. I'm
Yeah.
I'm, re-
Yeah.
I'm releasing a video series in the fall of just basic soft skills.
Mm.
For late grade high school people, for college students, basic handshake skills, eye contact skills, listening skills, approaching male and female differently or the same or
Yeah.
whatever, um, all of those kind of things, because I think they are increasingly lacking, and I see this around, in real life. I've noticed this that
Yeah.
those kind of abilities are really lacking. But you still remember somebody who looks you in the eye and respects you,
Mm.
and says, "I'm interested in what you have to say."
Yeah.
It's still important. It's the way we feel good about each other. It's the way we can exchange ideas safely.
Yeah.
And so I'm worried that is getting lost in the sort of technological freak out that we're having.